You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Should he be higher than 9th? Comment your thoughts right now in the comment section below where you would rank Fran Brown among all the head coaches in college football in the country, specifically in recruiting, not X's and O's, not game day stuff, not wins and losses, because again, Mario Cristobal is not the second best head coach in college football, but he's a pretty damn good recruiter over there at Miami, right? Now, I'm not going to sit here and say Brian Smith is being disrespectful to Syracuse and disrespectful to Fran Brown by putting him as the 9th best recruiter in the country among head coaches. That is a tremendous honor. And Brian also knows more recruiting than I will probably ever know in my entire life. I just want to throw that out there. But I will say this. Having said those, Fran Brown should be top 5. Fran Brown is definitely a top 5 head coach recruiter in the nation. Number 1, Syracuse is the outlier school on this list. I'm going to pull up the list again on YouTube and forget the names for just a moment here. Just listen to the schools, okay? Pretend that these names don't exist. Georgia, Miami, Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, Notre Dame, Auburn, Clemson, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Oklahoma. Those are all, for the most part, historic national football powers. Now, they all have varying degrees of success. Sometimes those schools like Ohio State, they're good every single year. Same thing with Georgia. They're just really good every year, basically, no matter what. Some schools like Auburn, for example, they'll have some down years. They'll have some really good years and spike years where they can get to a national championship and win a national championship, but they'll also have years where they crater and they miss a bowl. But regardless, to see those schools on a top 12 list is not that surprising. Those are big football programs with big NIL budgets, certainly bigger than Syracuse. And then the one outlier school on that list, again, forget the names, is Syracuse, which some people have actually brought this up to me before. It's not really Syracuse fans. It's fans actually of SEC schools. My friends are fans of SEC schools, and they'll mention how Syracuse is a private school in New York. So they have a huge athletic budget and they spend a ton of money. They spend more than everyone else. They have a huge NIL budget. That is simply not true. Syracuse football does not spend as much on its athletic programs compared to those other schools on the list. And I don't even think it's necessarily close between some of those schools. So essentially what I'm saying is that Fran Brown is doing more with less. And if Fran Brown keeps it up, if he keeps doing what he's doing with Syracuse, and then it starts really more translating on the field, it did last year. It did, right? They went 10-3. But if he keeps doing these things, one or two things is going to happen. Either Syracuse will invest more in Fran Brown, aka they'll give him a raise and more term on his contract, and they'll invest more in the program in general to the point where maybe they one day do get into national title conversation. And instead of being, in the 30s, low 40s and recruiting around the nation, they're top 10. They're top 5. They're number 1 or 2 in the ACC, right? Or Fran Brown leaves, which I know we don't really want to think about, and I don't think that's going to happen necessarily in the near future, but it's just something to keep in mind if, Syracuse really keeps winning these games. More context here with Fran Brown. Before Fran Brown arrived at Syracuse, he was the defensive backs coach at Georgia. And 24/7 Sports, so it wasn't Brian Smith, it was 24/7 Sports, named Fran Brown the number 1 recruiter in the nation. Now, obviously, at Georgia, it's a little bit easier to recruit. You got a lot more money. You are in the SEC. The SEC sends more players to the NFL than every other conference. And it's Georgia. It's a historic national program that's competing for national championships year in and year out. It's essentially, if they don't win the national championship, the season was a failure, right? Now, keeping that in mind, how it's easier to recruit at a school like Georgia, and obviously Fran Brown was named number one. How many of these coaches could do what Fran Brown is doing with the same restrictions that he has? I don't want to be dismissive of the other coaches on this list. They are great coaches. They are, for the most part, great recruiters. And hey, just because you have all the ingredients to be a great recruiter doesn't mean that you're going to be a great recruiter. We've seen it before, actually, with Florida, even before Billy Napier. Dan Mullen at Florida, not a very good recruiter. They were not happy with him. So just because you have all the ingredients doesn't mean you're going to be a great recruiter. But hey, how many of these coaches on this list can do what Fran Brown is actually doing? Is that a fair question? I think it is. Comment your thoughts in the comments section below. In fact, I think the one that's kind of closest to it is Dabo Swinney and what he did with Clemson. It's not like Clemson has this super rich, historic football program where they're Ohio State and they always win. He kind of built that program up to what they are now. Maybe Fran Brown could be the next Dabo Swinney, right? But I think if all else were equal, you give all these coaches the same restraints, same NIL, there are not 8 better head coaches in recruiting than Fran Brown around the nation. I'm sorry, there just isn't. There is no way that some of these coaches on this list, I don't know exactly who, but there's no way that some of them would have Syracuse in the race for a 4-star like Messiah Hampton, even though he's a New York guy, or a 5-star like Calvin Russell. There's just no way. And I kind of think of Marvin Harrison Jr. here. Just want to bring up this real quick. Maybe some of you are familiar with Marvin Harrison Jr. as far as his story with Syracuse football. When he was coming out of high school in the 2021 recruiting class, Syracuse was not even remotely close to landing Marvin Harrison Jr. Keep in mind that his father, Marvin Harrison Sr., played for Syracuse and was a first-round pick and became a member of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Keep that in mind. It would be, and Marvin Harrison Jr. did not even consider Syracuse. It would be like if Kyan Anthony did not consider Syracuse basketball. Forget not committing. If he didn't even consider it. If Syracuse basketball offered Kyan Anthony and he's just like, no, I'm not going there. That's just not happening. I won't even visit. That's kind of what happened with Marvin Harrison Jr. And one of the reasons is because he cited that Syracuse doesn't really develop receivers into the National Football League. Certainly, I mean, nobody can compete with Ohio State in that regard. But the reason why I bring up Marvin Harrison Jr. back in 2021 is this. I bet you if Fran Brown was the head coach at that time, Marvin Harrison Jr. would have strongly considered Syracuse football. Dare I say he might have even committed to Syracuse football. That is the difference between Fran Brown and what Syracuse has had in the past. And that's also why I question, could these other head coaches on this list do what Fran Brown is doing? So overall, I don't really know exactly who I would bump out in the top 9, 10. But Fran Brown's a top 5 recruiter in the nation among head coaches. You can make an argument that he should be top 3 or even number 1. But I'll just settle on conservatively top 5 right now. And you're going to have to find 4 names that you need to bump below him.